All right, let's continue this conversation with Elaine Chao. She is former Labor Secretary under George W. Bush and former Transportation Secretary during President Trump's first term. Madam Secretary, I'm not sure if you heard that whole conversation, but let's jump right. Okay, perfect. Let's use that as our jumping off point. Do you think the changes in the numbers or the original numbers, do you think that there was political motivation behind this, or do you think they're just bad at figuring out the numbers over there?
You know, I've been the labor secretary. I was labor secretary for 8 years. So I have watched over 8 years of monthly releases of the employment and unemployment numbers. First of all, it is very, very difficult to tamper or to interfere with these numbers. As has been mentioned before, hundreds of people have their hands on these numbers as they are being formulated from the state level up. And the Monday before the Friday of the first Friday of the month that these numbers are released, the process is very much locked down. BLS is very concerned about the security of these numbers. So only about 40 people, but 40 is still a lot toward the end in the last week that deal with these numbers. If anything were to be awry, I think one of these 40 people in the final analysis would have spoken up. So it's highly unlikely. And given how much the BLS looks toward the integrity of these numbers, that these numbers are not right. Having said that, I will say the president does have the right to appoint and replace whoever he wants to, because this is the commissioner of the BLS is a political appointee. Now, they're assigned to, 4-year terms, but increasingly now over the recent years, 4-year terms and their tenure are not respected as much. For example, in the last administration, the Social Security administrator was terminated in the first year of a 5-year term. So these term appointments are important, but they're not as sacrosanct as they used to be. And then having said that, also, I do want to mention, I think the revisions are an issue. But the issue is not so much, why is it that way? It's much more the fact that before COVID, there are 2 surveys that contribute to the numbers. One is the household survey. It's about 60,000. And then you have the employment survey, which comes from employers. And the response rate to the establishment survey has been about 60% prior to COVID. Ever since COVID, the response rate has dropped even further to about 43%. So what we're seeing is less and less reliable responses. We're seeing less responses. And this reduced response rate, I think, needs to be addressed. We need to find out and find new ways to get employers to answer more fully these questions so that we get a more accurate display of the economy.
Okay, so maybe there are some problems with the way we're gathering the information or the way respondents are or are not sending in at this point. If it's hard to make a change on these numbers because there are so many people involved ahead of time, what do you think about the new person that's going to be named? It sounds like you're a believer in the process, at least, for how these numbers come about. Will you have faith?
I think the process is, when I was secretary for 8 years, and there were months in which I didn't like the numbers, in which the White House didn't like the numbers, but we basically never thought of it as, somehow that it was not prepared correctly. And we did scrutinize the process to make sure that the process was, secure and that there was no outside interference. I think that is a legitimate point, that we need to restore and maintain confidence in these numbers, because I think that there's very little opportunity for outside forces to impinge upon them. But the revisions are of concern. They speak to a longer standing problem, and that is, how do we get the responses?
That makes sense to me. You want better data coming into this. I guess my question is, Absolutely. Are you at all concerned about President Trump putting in a political appointee? You say this has always been a political appointee position. Do you think that person will have any more influence over the numbers, or it doesn't really matter who's put in that position?
Even if there's nobody at the head of BLS, the bureaucracy, for lack of a better word, will continue to prepare these numbers. And they have a process that is very secure, that is very highly regarded, and that's what the numbers are going to be. I hope that the new person, whoever it will be someone who respects the integrity and the reputation of the institution. And as mentioned, the commissioner doesn't really get involved in preparing the numbers. He or she gets the numbers about Wednesday of the Friday before release. And then on Thursday afternoon, about 4:30, the numbers are given over to the White House, the president, the chief of staff, and the economic, a very select number of people, 3 or 4 people who know about it. And then the final number is released precisely, not a minute sooner, not a minute later, at 8:30 on the first Friday of every month.
Okay. It's good to know that process.
It is.
It's good to know your thoughts on that, Madam Secretary.
President Trump lost it on that Thursday, remember?
Probably,
with
yeah.
one about Jay Powell again.
Yeah.
And
put the extra pressure on
yeah.
it. So it's good to know that, Elaine. Thank you very much, Madam Secretary. We appreciate you coming on and describing all of this to us.